One of the things that we've learned while we've been here at the Sixth Floor Museum is that it's not so much that people come to Dallas and go to the Sixth Floor Museum. People come to the Sixth Floor Museum and see the rest of Dallas. And we're here with Lindsay and Charlie, who have given us a tour of this incredible facility. How long has this been open?
The museum opened in February of 1989. It was a controversial museum to open. There were a lot of people in Dallas who didn't want this site to be a museum, so it was a lot of back and forth within the community, and it took a long time. So when it opened on President's Day in February of 1989, it was a big deal.
Okay, and Charlie, I want to ask you, today is the middle of a busy work week, and I know that it's spring break in different parts of America, but I found it fascinating that it was so busy and there were so many people. Is that a pretty common occurrence?
That is a pretty common occurrence. Like you said, spring break does last here at the museum for about 6-7 weeks, because we do get people from all over, from different countries, but spring breaks throughout the country, when they have their spring break, find their way to Dallas somehow.
It's like you were saying, that people planned the rest of their Dallas trip around this first visit. So what I found fascinating is in getting up close to those photos of the seconds before the actual shots were fired, and then once the shots were fired, I didn't really understand what Jacqueline Kennedy was doing and crawling over the back seat, and I didn't understand why the president had his arms up. So Lindsay, can you speak to that? Because there are countless documentaries out there, and that's sort of a piece for me that I learned for the first time today.
Sure. If you're looking at the frames of the Zapruder film, there's a moment when Kennedy, it doesn't show up in the film itself, but when Kennedy comes from behind one of the traffic signs at the side of Dealey Plaza, he has his fists up by his neck and his elbows up. And you can see Jacqueline Kennedy leaning over and asking him what's wrong, what's happening. And when she does that, her head in the pink pillbox hat is right next to Kennedy's head. So when the shot is fired that basically explodes the back of Kennedy's head, that was about 8 inches from Jackie's own head. And you can literally say the world just exploded around her. She was traumatized. She herself never recalled going on the back of the limousine. You know, people could tell her, they could certainly show her photographic evidence. I hope no one did, but they could. And she just, you know, people have theorized she was chasing the part of his head that fell off, or she was just trying to get away. We probably won't ever be able to pin down an exact answer to that.
There are so many incredible things to see up there, and I'm wondering where you find people tend to congregate the most. Is it trying to get a look out of that same window that Lee Harvey Oswald is said to have been looking out of? Or is it getting to a window that's further down so that you can see the X on the road?
Well, you would have to say that the sniper's perch is probably where people are most fascinated, but at the very beginning of the tour is where we will find most people will spend a lot of time. They'll stop there because, like I said, they have an idea of what to expect when they're coming to the museum. But there's so much more information that they do get caught up right there at the beginning, and then they slowly trickle down. But they do want to. That's where you would find people wanting to take photographs and. At the sniper's nest.
Well, and I will say that at the beginning of the exhibit, they are talking about who Kennedy was and what 1960 was like and his campaign and the early years in the White House. And in 1989, the people who came here didn't have to spend a lot of time there. They recalled it.
Yeah.
Today, most people have no idea or very little idea, so they're spending a lot of time looking at these books we have, these records from the kids are like, what is that? That is a very big CD. And it's like, no, that's not a CD. It's a record. It's an LP. You know, people are just moving through there. They had no idea what his campaign was like. A couple of years ago, we got to do a temporary exhibit that was just about the Kennedy campaign, and that was a lot of fun to do because you can't explore that whole story in the tiny space that you have on the 6th floor. So people congregate at the beginning now because they need to absorb that information to make sense of what comes later.
Right. What I noticed also that was very interesting is the small amount of space that you've allowed for the Lee Harvey Oswald piece. And I know as a journalist, when someone is murdered, we tend not to name the suspect out of respect for the victim. So that, to me, is like, this place is not about honoring, recognizing, giving that name much attention. It's really the focus is on Kennedy. It felt like that upstairs.
Well, you also have to realize that is true. But when that happened, that was the first time that an event took over television. Mm-hmm. It was the first time that television just stopped down everything, and that's all you saw on television for 3 days. And while that was happening simultaneously, Lee Harvey Oswald's actions were separate. Remember, he was not arrested for the assassination. He was arrested for the murder of a police officer, Officer Tippit.
I'm not entirely sure I knew that. So while he's being carried,
it was a back and forth with the police and with this going on, and I mean all kinds of things were happening at the same time. Mm-hmm. So the world news took over the assassination. Dallas was looking for a police murderer mm-hmm. at the same time dealing with the assassination.
So I'm going to pass the mic back to Neil. I just want to ask you really quickly, Lindsay. So what have you learned working here? So what didn't you know that you now know? Because I just learned that from Charlie. So what is fascinating? What did you discover in working here?
I was not a Kennedy person when I started here. My last job was at a children's museum. So when I came here, I was not coming from a Kennedy historic studies kind of background. So I've learned virtually all of it since I've been here, but I've had the privilege of doing so with some extremely knowledgeable staff members and the collections. Our collections are more than 50,000 items. We have photographs, we have some of the news footage from local radio and television stations, both the audio and the video recordings. We have home movies. We've got artifacts, newspapers, printing plates from the old newspapers. We've got scrapbooks. People were so excited that Kennedy was coming, they started keeping scrapbooks, and then he was shot here, and they kept more and more and more. So we have scrapbooks, of what people felt was important to recall at that time. We have journals and diaries and dolls and all kinds of things. We've got policemen's clothing and badges. The collections are amazing, and it's a great way to learn about the assassination is to look at what we have in the museum's collection.
I don't know if you could hear it, but we were just listening to the sound of a car horn being hit repeatedly, because what happens out this window, and I guess this happens all the time, is people go to stand on the X, which is the mark on the road where the car was when the fatal shots were fired, and they go and they stand on the X and get their pictures taken. That must get really tiresome.
It's dangerous because people in Dallas are known for their driving abilities. And sorry, Dallas, but that happens, and you see it every day.
Yeah, I mean, it's a 3-lane exit to multiple highways. This is how you get out of Dallas. It's a crazy place to stand and have your picture taken.
Okay, one last question. Conspiracy theories, because there are countless. You've got a whole wall upstairs that's dedicated to the conspiracy theory piece. So do we now know, and have we got the definitive story around the assassination?
Well, what we do know, what has been proven as truth. We do know that the conspiracy theories themselves, our late curator, most of those have been proven not true. So we're going with what we consider factual.
I like the way he said most. Did you see that?
Yeah, I know. Dun, dun,
well,
dun.
There are some that have been disproven. There's the theory that someone popped up out of a manhole cover and shot head on into the limousine. Our curators at one point a few years ago got down in the manhole and were like, you can't see anything. Like you're like standing up out of the hole before you can take any view around you. It's not like you can just peep above there and get some idea. It's some theories are easier disproven than others.
I assume that November the 22nd is the worst day of the year to try and get tickets to come in here and see the museum.
It's one of the worst days. The museum's popular. Its popularity is year-round. It really depends. One of the biggest days, if there's a Cowboy game in town, you get an extra 100,000 people at a stadium in the city for the first time. So they're coming here for their 3-day stay. And that's one of the craziest times. And another is Black Friday. Black Friday is one of the busiest days of the year for us.
For those who don't want to shop.
Exactly, me.
Yeah, tends to be us.
Because that's the other craziest place to stand in is a parking lot on Black Friday indeed. Okay, thank you so much for this has been amazing. Thank you. If we want to find you online, where do we go?
JFK.org.